Welcome back. All right, so I'm going to have some fun with this one as we talk about the Nashville Predators, who were just knocked out of the playoffs a couple days ago as I record this. And I've got their original logo, which I got this one through, I think that was just through the NHL site. That's the reverse retro, which is the original. The Meth Tiger, which is fantastic. Gotta love the tiger. And then their current logo, which is very similar to the original, but there's some color differences, some differences in the size of teeth, and all that other wonderful stuff. And then what I'm wearing is the Grail jersey that I got just this past week, which is my favorite Nashville jersey ever. And this is why when I talk about the gold jerseys, and I'm not a fan of the gold jerseys, it's not that I'm hating on the gold jerseys, that I love the blue jerseys that they've had. And I'd love to see a third at some point soon that looks a lot like, or is just this one. This one's absolutely fantastic. Took me years to get this jersey. Many years. The entire time of this channel's existence, over 5 years, I was hunting for this jersey, and I have a fake. So at some point I'll do a video where I compare this one with the fake that I have that broke my heart. So, and that fake I got like 3 years ago, and every day from then until now I've been hunting. So I got this one via eBay, and there you go. Now we'll talk about the Nashville Predators, shall we? Not just their logo and their jerseys, as much fun as that is to talk about. Again, get a blue third, Nashville. Thank you very much. So this year their record was 31-23-2, and it's easy to just look at them losing in the first round against Carolina and say, well, might have been better off to just not make it. I will say this: their comeback was something that I saw coming, and this was while they were dealing with all kinds of injuries, and this is why I don't talk a lot about injuries being a problem for teams that get knocked out or miss the playoffs, because Nashville, at a time where they were besieged by injuries, started winning games. Despite not having their best lineup, they were out there, they were winning games, they were playing very, very well. So this is why the whole argument, I'm not saying that it's an argument that you can't make. I'm just saying that when I review a team's season, I'm not going to use injuries and go, well, they would have won the cup, but they got injured, so... Because then that's all these videos would be. And as enjoyable as that might be for the first 4 or 5 videos, by number 20, you guys would be saying, okay, you can knock it off now. So their numbers, their power play numbers need to be improved. Their special teams need to improve next season. This is a problem. 17.61% on the power play in the regular season, 75.44% on the penalty kill. And it makes you wonder how they reached the playoffs. And the reality is, scoring 5-on-5 got them to the playoffs, as well as heroic goaltending from UC Saros. In the playoffs, their numbers get worse on the power play, 11.5%. Their penalty kill gets a little bit better at 79%, but you add these two numbers together, that equals 90. You add these two numbers together, you get 93. So that's definitely not good enough, and that's something they need to improve. I don't think Nashville's that far off. You look at that series against Carolina, they got into double overtime twice. They got it into overtime once, or they got it in regular overtime twice. So, 4 overtime games tell you they were close. They just didn't have that it factor to win that series. And that's something that they're going to have to look at. And I would think David Poile, I think he can change this on the fly. I do, because they're not an old team. They're not a team that's dealing with all of these guys who are well past their prime. And it's a pretty deep team, both up front and on the blue line. It's just a matter of, you can make the argument about the bad contracts, and they're there, and I don't even have that on the board, because we know the bad contracts exist. And we talk about bad contracts all the time. There's always things about bad contracts all over the internet. So I feel like when I make these videos, it's better to talk about the best contracts than all the bad ones, because there'll be plenty of time to talk about that for the rest of the summer. So they're pending unrestricted free agents. Michael Granlund, and I would think Granlund probably sticks around. I think he played well enough in the playoffs. I think he was important enough he sticks around. Erik Haula. I think Haula sticks around. I think he endeared himself to Nashville fans while upsetting Carolina fans at the same time, which seemed to make him happy. I think he stays. Brad Richardson probably goes. I think Richardson might be the end for his career there. Love Brad Richardson, but it's probably the end of the road for him there. Eric Goodbranson, I don't think they bring Goodbranson back. That was just a depth pickup. Anyways, Pekka Rinne, from the emotion that was outpouring from Nashville fans and from Pekka Rinne at the end of the season when he got that shutout in his last game, it certainly feels like the 38-year-old probably doesn't come back next year. So for Nashville, they will be in the market for another goaltender. Or they bring up a goaltender and see what's going on. But I have a feeling that they probably bring in another goaltender. They're pending restricted free agents. That's where things get interesting. Ellie Tolvanen. How much is Tolvanen worth and for how long? You have to think it's a bridge contract, but how much does he get? Tolvanen took great strides in the second half of the season. Matthew Olivier. Tough depth guy. I like Olivier. I think he was useful for them. Tanner Jeannot. Tanner Jeannot was pretty good for them. He really was. He was pretty good for them overall. And I would expect that they'll reward him handsomely for that. Dante Fabro, good, solid top four defenseman for their future. We'll see how much he's worth as well. Again, don't expect huge long-term contracts here. Ben Harper, I thought he was a good defenseman for them as well. Again, depth, so not going to cost them a lot of money. And UC Saros, who is a restricted free agent, probably is going to be able to back up a Brinks truck to Nashville, to their head offices, and just fill this up. Saros got them to the playoffs. Saros definitely took that next step and proved that goaltenders who are 6 feet or shorter don't necessarily have to end up on the scrap heap, and maybe they should get some more respect. So Saros was fantastic, and he's going to get paid. Players 22 years of age and younger that played for them. So 22 years of age and younger that played for them. Ellie Tolvanen, Dante Fabro, and David Ferentz. The one thing with Nashville, they've been amongst the better teams for a while, and so they don't have that explosive young talent coming up necessarily, but there's some good young players here. There's some good prospects too, 22 and under. I'm just covering the players that have already debuted for the team. And 32 and over, so this is the older players, only Brad Richardson and Pekka Rinne. So this is why I'm saying you don't need to necessarily pull it apart, because it's not an old roster. And in the playoffs, Johansson and Duchesne played relatively well. They had pretty good runs. So we don't necessarily need to see them tear it apart. I think if there was a taker for Johansson or Duchesne's contract, I think David Poile would jump at it, but I don't necessarily think that it happens. The one thing, of course, that does is it does mean that it's harder for you to build a contending roster when you've got money spent on bad contracts. They're not the only team that's done that. At some point this summer, once we get through free agency and everything, I could take a look at which teams have the most money that's kind of spent maybe in a fashion that you wish it wasn't, where there's players getting $8 or $9 million, or sometimes 6 or 7, that you look at and you say, they probably could have fixed that for cheaper, or maybe they should have let that player go. But when we look at this team in general, it revolves around Josi and Saros. Josi was their leading scorer during the regular season, 48 games, 8 goals, 25 assists, 33 points. He had a rough start to the season. Nashville had a rough start to the season. Josi played better. Nashville got better. These things are definitely related. And so, their defense is as good as Josi makes it. In the playoffs, their leading scorer was Granlund. 6 games, 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points. Again, I think Granlund likely stays in Nashville. I would be kind of surprised if he moved on at this stage. Their top goaltender doesn't change between the regular season and the playoffs. Be interesting to see if, when I'm going through all these teams that have got knocked out of the playoffs, how many teams that changes for them. But regular season, Saros 21-11-1 with a .927 save percentage. Keep in mind with Saros, his numbers weren't great to start the season either. The goaltending wasn't fantastic in Nashville, and he turned it around. In the playoffs, he's 2-4. But he has a .921 save percentage. So there's nobody who's going to say that Saros wasn't a huge part of Nashville's run to the playoffs, and that he didn't keep them in this series maybe longer than they should have been in it against Carolina. So Saros is a legit number 1 goaltender now. Over their last 5 seasons, you can understand why people might look at him and say, well, they need to do some sort of a retool, because just the overall results haven't been great over the last few years. 31-23-2 their record this year. They lose in round 1 to Carolina. Last year, 35-26-8. They lost the qualifying round to Arizona 3-1. And that was really disappointing. I think there's more positives to take out of this year than there was out of last year where they lost to Arizona. 2018-2019, they're 47-29-6. They lost in round 1 against Dallas in 6. And it was goaltending that cost Nashville that series. That it just wasn't there. So for Nashville, that series was really the starting point of, okay, they need to switch over from Rinne to Saros. And now we're fully into the Saros era. 2017-2018, they finished 53-18-1. They won the President's Trophy, and then they lost in round 2 against Winnipeg, who was right with them for that President's Trophy. And it was a really disappointing result because 2016-2017, they went to the final where they lost to Pittsburgh in 6. And of course, in that final, that's where you have Rinne playing fantastic to get to the final, and then Pittsburgh just dissects them in the final. And any game in Pittsburgh, it just fell apart for them. So, yeah, it's been interesting to watch Nashville over the last 5 years. And I can understand why there are those who will look at this and say, well, they probably need to do something to change things up to try to change their trajectory. However, they did make round 1 this year, and technically last year they lost in the qualifying round. And since it's called the qualifying round, that would tell you they didn't make it to round 1. So there's progress there. And again, I really thought they gave Carolina as much of a fight as you could expect. Their best contracts, and these are contracts going forward. Anything that expires this year, I don't count as being a good contract because we don't know what they're going to make next year. Rocco Grimaldi, $2 million through next season. Grimaldi, I know he doesn't play every night, but he's such a good energy player. I think that contract's really good. He may very well end up being a guy that ends up going to Seattle. I could potentially see a situation where once everybody's protected, Grimaldi ends up being the guy that goes to Seattle. Matthias Ekholm, $3.75 million for another season. And yeah, I like Ekholm a lot. I think he's a fantastic defenseman. There have been times where I've rated him very highly around the NHL in the overall grand scheme of things. I think he gets overshadowed by other defensemen on this team, Ellis and Yossi being those examples. If he played on another team where he could truly be a number 1, I think he'd probably get more notice, but he's an excellent defenseman, and I like that contract a lot. So there are a couple of good contracts there to maybe offset some of the bad contracts, and we'll see how Nashville navigates the summer, because honestly, what they do with their contract situation, how they end up trying to find a way to resolve that, could go a long way to deciding the success they do or don't have next year. And yeah, so the road forward is kind of unclear, but they should still be in the mix for a playoff spot. And if they can fix their special teams, they might be in the running for a home ice advantage in the Central next year. But again, a lot of things have to fall the right way for that to happen. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below regarding the Nashville Predators. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.